Hello, everybody. We're going to start our unit on surviving, persisting, and overcoming. Each week, we're going to cover one poem. This week, it will be Invictus by William Henley. And as we go through this, we are going to use a three reading method where first we read it for our first impressions, and you, as just a person and a reader, can just enjoy the poem for what it is and try to gather some meaning out of it for yourself. And then in our second reading, we'll go through and analyze it. And I'll explain some things. Like if you don't know what bludgeoning means, we'll talk about the vocabulary, we'll talk about the meaning inside of it, and look at some of the poetic aspects, look at the metaphor it has at the end. And then we'll do the third reading where it'll just be a clean reading like the first one, but we'll take those layers of what did you get just as a reader on the first read, and then what did you further understand and get when we did our second read, when we talked about the background and analysis. And then you can kind of put it all together in that third read to see if if your perspective changed from the first read to the third read. And so let's start with our first read, Invictus by William Henley. Out of the night that covers me, black as the pit from pole to pole, I think whatever gods may be for my unconquerable soul. In the fell clutch of circumstance, I have not winced nor cried aloud. Under the bludgeonings of chance, my head is bloody, but unbowed. Beyond this place of wrath and tears looms but the horror of the shade, and yet the menace of the years finds and shall find me unafraid. It matters not how strait the gate, how charged with punishments the scroll. I am the master of my fate. I am the captain of my soul. So, as I was reading, maybe you picked up on some of this sort of juxtaposition between difficulty and pain and sort of perseverance. And by juxtaposition, I mean like we have two contrasting ideas here, like we have night, black, pit, winced, bludgeoning, bloody, these darker words. And in contrast, to those words, we have words like unconquerable, unbowed, unafraid, and master and captain. And so we have these two ideas kind of warring. It's like we have these really painful things in life that are at war with our desire to persist and overcome. And so that's where he's going with this poem, and we'll kind of read it through. And in the second analysis, it's really about we kind of see it for what it is when we do the first read, but why do we think that that's the theme? Like, why did this feel powerful? I hope you really felt like it was a powerful, moving poem, because there's something in it that just kind of reaches out when you feel like you just can't do something, and it makes you feel like you can do something because it's powerful poetry. And so, the analysis gets to the why is it powerful and the how is it powerful. And so we'll do our analysis down here, but I do think that this poem, with a little bit of context, might make a little bit more sense given when Henley, here he is, wrote it. So let's talk about the background, and then we'll get down to our analysis there at the bottom. The poem was written in 1875. So, hence words like bludgeoning and clutch of circumstance looms, but the horror of the shade, very Victorian words being used here. So, 1875, older poem. The poem was written 1875 when Henley, an English poet, thought he would have to amputate his one remaining leg. He lost the first to tuberculosis at 17, which he had suffered from since age 12. And now he was facing losing another leg. However, he had multiple surgeries to save that last leg. So this poem is about when he was in the hospital and he didn't know, is he going to lose his leg? Multiple surgeries seemed like it might or might not. It just could have been some painful road on the way to losing his other leg and being in a wheelchair. And so he wasn't a stranger to pain and just maybe perhaps even that feeling of giving up when things feel overwhelming. And so that's what this poem is about. Somebody that, has lived through, as we get down here, it's like yet the menace of the years. Somebody who's lived at the menace of the years. Tuberculosis is very difficult to go through, and losing your legs, that's a very terrible psychological thing. It hinders your physical abilities to live as well. Very difficult. And that's what that poem is about, being in that sort of mindset of I am I am feeling under everything right now, and how can I get to the point of survival and persisting and overcoming in the face of what's happening. He published this poem in 1888 without a title. This has a very popular title, and it's interesting that he didn't publish it with a title, nor did he ever give it a title. When the poem was reprinted, it went under many different titles not given by Henley, like Myself, Song of a Strong Soul, My Soul, Clear Grit, Master of His Fate, and Captain of My Soul. I like the last two because they kind of go to the last two lines, which are very powerful. The other ones feel, I don't necessarily like those. Clear Grit feels like kind of American West, but the Myself and Song of a Strong Soul in My Soul feel a little bit Song of Myself, from uh, our American poet Whitman. And so I kind of don't love that, because that kind of makes it seem like he was trying to do something that Whitman was doing. And so don't really love those. These like feel okay. The commonly accepted title Invictus, which is Latin for unconquered or undefeated, kind of like you have like unconquerable right here. So that makes sense. You can kind of see the word like vict, like victory, like maybe in victory, sort of kind of telling us that the Latin is kind of like unconquered or in victory, like that sort of thing. It was added by Arthur Quiller Couch when he compiled a book of poetry in 1900. And usually that's the accepted title, not given by the author. So, kind of that makes it a little bit of an interesting title. And perhaps you can think about how titles can kind of give away something or be part of the poem or not part of the poem, and if they are important, because this actually wasn't part of the creative artistry of our author, and so kind of leaves it in a sort of strange place. um, that you can write about when you do your paragraph after we're done. But Invictus by William Henley. So out here I have two different kinds of words happening. I highlighted our vocabulary, and the really strong vocabulary did fall into kind of this idea on one side of dark. It's like the sort of dark vocabulary, the night, the pit, the fell clutch of circumstance, bludgeoning. So we have the darker vocabulary on one side of the things being juxtaposed, being put in contrast with the more words of like of bravery. Like I think, I'm unconquered, unbowed, unafraid, not winced or cried aloud. So kind of we have the words that go with this idea, um, as well. So we have these two kind of ideas on either side, and so let's kind of look at them. And besides just dark and brave, we'll maybe tease out some other words that could work in with the theme and the tone of the poem. Out of the night that covers me, black as the pit from pole to pole. So let's talk about what this could mean. So, first, like pole to pole, kind of just being from one side to the other. So, a black as the pit from pole to pole. So, we have our simile here with our word as. So, he's kind of trying to create this visual of it's so black. We have this pit, it's completely dark from one side to the other. And that is how dark the night that covers him feels. Now, I don't want to be the person that puts symbolism where there is not symbolism, but he could have literally been writing this at night. And so that's what he's talking about. But this feels like where he says a night that covers me, it feels like it's a menacing night, whether or not it was literally at night or not. It's more of this idea that it's the night, the darkness, the black. It's not just like it's dark. It's like it's pitch black. The black from one side to the other has completely covered him. And that's, those moments where you feel like I can't go on, like the darkness has come. The darkness is rising. And he's saying he could feel that. And that's how he opens his poem, which openings to poems are very important. It's that first impression. And the first impression he wants to tell us is, I feel overwhelmed. And then he goes back. I thank whatever gods may be for my unconquerable soul. And as he talks about, he's going to use different words, but he'll say like whatever gods, or he'll talk of chance and the menace of the years, or he'll talk about fate. And so he's kind of got this whatever sort of fate and chance and circumstance and gods, whatever it may be that is pushing me and that is filling my life with this night. I thank them. So I think there's this kind of sense of perhaps gratitude and perseverance happening with these words. But I do like that he's saying, like, I'm thankful for my unconquerable soul. And just that bravery of the human spirit. And it's like that, just that human spirit that in the face of something that you don't like, you are able to say, I can do this. I can overcome. I can persevere. And no matter what happens, lose both legs. I will be okay. I have an unconquerable soul. So he's giving us both of these ideas in the poem. But he starts with the more dreary idea. And he's like, the dreary idea, it's kind of broken into halves here. So we kind of look like we have half of it is the sort of darkness, and then the other half is the sort of light. I can do this. And then he kind of goes one and the other here. So it's like one, one. Oh, sorry, my colors are getting messed up here. He's like going one, one. It's kind of going back and forth. But I think this kind of gives the sense of the very back and forth of sometimes when we're feeling like we have to persist through something, it's hard, and our mind is going to go back and forth. It's like we're confronted with something that is very hard, and then we try to be sort of gracious and thankful and brave, and then it comes back, and then we try again, and then it comes back, and then we try again, and then it really really sort of weighs us down, and then we come back again. And then again he kind of goes, he's like, but it doesn't matter. And then he ends on the note, because beginnings, endings, very important, because this tells us he starts in darkness and then he ends with the sort of braver side. But you can see the war in his mind going back and forth. Can I do this or can I not? And so let's go to the second stanza. In the fell clutch of circumstance. So these are maybe that's a very strange way of phrasing it. So perhaps this rephrase it. So fell clutch. So if we think of fell, knocking something down, right? So like the fell clutch. So fell, knocking down. Let's think of it as something that's difficult, like a difficult grasp. Like instead of clutch, let's say like a hard grasp, or perhaps like a difficult grasp, like something fell, like as in it's going to knock you down and take you out. So maybe we'll just put that with difficulty. And then of circumstance, like of life, really, like I am in the hard hold of life. I have not winced nor cried aloud. And so that's kind of that fell clutch of circumstance, kind of a strange way of putting it, but poetic, because we are reading a poem. And so, in the difficult grasp of life here, I have not winced or cried aloud. I do like this part, because it kind of gives this nod to the sort of, because he's English, that sort of like English, that like brave, like stay calm and carry on, that sort of stiff upper lip. Like not only is it I am unconquerable and I am unbowed, but I'm not even wincing or crying. Like this guy is as hard as nails here. So, and then under the bludgeonings of chance. So again, a word that goes over here. There's this kind of gets to a more violent part of this violent stanza, I would almost say. Bludgeoning being if you are bludgeoned with a bludgeon is like a large club, usually like a large wood club. It'd be like a bat, only it wouldn't be like you buy the bat. It's just like a big piece of tree and kind of made it into something you can hit someone with and bludgeon them with. And so like being bludgeoned, so like hit over the head with something gigantic like a bat. Of chance, fate and life. I am being like beat over the head by life, and my head is bloody. Again, this is more of a violent stanza, I would say, because it's like this fell clutch of circumstance. It's like this hard, difficult grasp. And I'm being like hit over the head till I'm bloody by life. I mean, this is like really how he feels his circumstances are going. It's not just like this sort of mental, I feel the night covering me, but this feels like a very physical sort of, I'm being like beaten down, but I remain unbowed. So, still I feel like this is him introducing us and saying, this is hard, but I can do it. And then this is him saying, it's really hard. I can do it. It's really hard. I can do it. Going back and forth. That's a little bit more of a back and forth stanza. And then I move into the third stanza. Beyond this place of wrath and tears looms the horror of the shade. And so we could say wrath being anger, beyond the place of anger and tears. We've all, felt that place. And he's saying, I am beyond that place of even wrath and anger and tears, because maybe that's like his first place he goes to. It's like I'm feeling the darkness covering me, and then I've been beaten by life, and now I'm past wrath, I'm past tears, I'm beyond it, and it looms the horror of the shade. And so looms is kind of that dark appearance of like a promising doom. It's like a kitten doesn't loom playfully over our shoulder. That's not how you use loom. It'd be more of like the dark shadow loomed over me as he brought a knife up in the background, like that sort of things. That's looms, always has that sort of promising doom to it. So, and then the horror, he decided to put this in capitalization. In the Victorian era, sometimes when something was important and it was a noun, a lot of times virtues and sins were put in capitalization to give it some emphasis, like a word like justice, prudence, virtue would be capitalized. And here we have a word like horror being capitalized, because it's not just like, oh, this is like horrific and terrible. It's like, this is horror. And beyond that, so we've got this promising doom and we've got some horror of the shade. Now, shade, obviously darkness, right? This night that is covering him, but maybe even it's been suggested that it could be the darkness of death, because I feel mentally unprepared. I'm kind of getting assaulted physically, and now it's kind of like looms the horror of the shade. It's like I feel the promising doom and terror of death. You could almost say that. But shade could just mean like the darkness. It doesn't have to mean death. Um, and yet the menace of the years. And so he's talking about an ongoing thing that he has to persist through, and thinking about his life and his poor health. He's talking about, this isn't just something like, oh, I'm having a really bad day and I'm trying to like not have a bad day. Um, Not that bad days aren't terrible. We all have them. But he's kind of like, this is beyond that. And it's a menace that's happened for many years. And so yet finds me unafraid. And so again, he said that, beyond crying and anger might loom death, but it finds and shall find me in the future, unafraid. Now, something kind of worth noting about some of his different words. Uh, each time he's ending his stanza, he's ending it on a brave note, which is getting towards, that sort of idea and theme. You can probably think of a better word than brave. I intentionally didn't list a bunch of words because hopefully I'm saying some that perhaps can uh, come to your mind if you want to think about tone. And instead of saying that, he could say, for my strong soul, he could have said, but my head is upright. And he could says, finds and shall find me brave. I think it's interesting that he chose to take the word captive, like I am conquered, I am bowed, I am afraid, and take the opposite of it, turn it into the negative, almost like as if he's taking back that conqueredness and that bowing of his head and that afraidness that he's actually felt. It's like he's taking it back and adding he's unifying the terrible things in his life. So I think it's important that in his word choice, he chose to say instead of just saying I'm strong, I am upright, I am brave. And I think that's different because when I say I am brave, I feel like that's a little different than saying I am unafraid. And so you can talk about that if you want to talk about word choice in your paragraph. Now, then we get to the end here. And it matters not how straight the gate. So this could be an illusion with an A, not an I. So an allusion to a sort of biblical text of straight is the gate and narrow the way that leads to eternal life. So he's kind of saying, like, it doesn't matter how hard the road is to get to your destination. Like, it could be like straight the gate, like very narrow the gate. It could be like a teeny tiny gate that I need to find, and it's very straight and upright, and I have to be straight and upright, and it's narrow and it's difficult path. So he's kind of alluding to this difficult path sort of illusion. And he says, or how charge the punishment with punishments, the scroll kind of meaning law. Now, this could be natural laws of the universe because there are just natural laws of, there are just punishments when things happen. And it could also be punishments that are given by society. It could be either one of those. It doesn't matter what the punishments. He's saying it doesn't matter how hard the path. It doesn't matter what the punishments that could be given by people or by society or by nature. I am the master of my fate. I am the captain of my soul. And so in the other stanzas where he was starting with these like find me unafraid but unbowed, my unconquerable soul, but he's kind of taking the I am. It's like he's creating that identity, I am. And when we define ourselves as something like I am, that's, I feel, very powerful. And compared to, you will find me unafraid, it's like I am unafraid. I feel it's kind of that powerful statement, and it's like the identity statement of what I am. I am the master of my fate and the captain of my soul, giving us that metaphor. So we had a simile up here. We have a metaphor down here of, we're sailing a ship, the ship of life, right? And he's not just being tossed and turned and, grabbing the edge and, tossing his cookies over the edge. He is the master of his fate. He is at the helm. He is taking it where it needs to go. And even if it is difficult, mentally, difficult physically, and leads to a place that he doesn't want to lead, into horrors and wrath and tears, no matter what, he's still captain. And there is something in that these things can happen, but when we're the captain, they happen. And we just, I can do this. I feel like there's a big statement in being master and being captain, as opposed to being like the passenger to what is happening in our life and letting these things pull us down. And so it was almost like, I feel like William Henley was maybe even trying to give himself a motivational speech, but I feel like it's very uplifting, and a good, great poem. Now, I went through a lot of things. We've talked about lots of different stuff. And for your question, it's write 10 sentences about the poem. You can choose your topic or topics. All of these things will kind of run together. I'm going to add in tone here. And as they run together, you can talk about multiple things. You can choose to talk about one thing, but think about theme, meaning, word choice, tone, rhythm. We didn't cover the rhyme scheme, but if you'd like to talk about the power of rhyme, you can. The title, I mean, you could write a persuasive 10 sentence paragraph or paragraphs about, is it wrong or right to just like title someone's artistic work what you feel like it fits with, even if it's a great idea? I don't know. It's kind of like editing where you have no business. But I mean, every book is edited. And so maybe that's okay. I don't know. I feel like it's wrong. Maybe you don't. You're kind of right about that. And what happens when we name something like In Victory Unconquerable? And I feel like maybe it even takes away from the idea of acknowledging the difficulty. Like, yes, it is about conquering, but sometimes I feel like it's about acknowledging the darkness and the difficulty too. And so I almost feel like, yeah, it's a great title. It really is, and very clever in Latin. But I don't know, it kind of tells us what the poem is about before we really get a chance to get in there and kind of see where he was at. And so, right about the title, how did it make you think? Um, Anything you noticed? And, if you tell me what you just thought and felt, that will naturally tell me the meaning and talk about word choice and tone. So let's do one final reading before we end. Invictus by William Henley. Out of the night that covers me, black as the pit from pole to pole, I thank whatever gods may be for my unconquerable soul. In the fell clutch of circumstance, I have not winced nor cried aloud. Under the bludgeonings of chance, my head is bloody but unbowed. Beyond this place of wrath and tears looms but the horror of the shade, and yet the menace of the years finds and shall find me unafraid. It matters not how strait the gate, how charged with punishments the scroll. I am the master of my fate. I am the captain of my soul. Thank you, guys.